Hi there, welcome to The Drum. I'm John Barron. Coming up, is Julia Gillard letting down the sisterhood on equal pay for equal work? The international campaign to stop passenger pat-downs at airports, and would you give your ex millions of dollars if you won the lottery? Our panel tonight, Monica Attard, host of ABC Radio's Sunday Profile, former New South Wales Liberal leader Kerry Chikarovski and Australian Workers' Union National Secretary and author of Confessions of a Faceless Man, Paul Howes. Well, first to the latest instalment tonight in the NBN saga. Independent Senator Nick Xenophon has been threatening to block a key bill to separate Telstra's retail and wholesale arms unless the government releases its NBN business plan. Right now he's meeting with the Prime Minister to ask her for a bit more detail on that broadband plan.
I'm not a wrecker, but I'm also not a sucker. More information needs to be provided. I need to see the fine print. So far, the government hasn't provided enough information for an informed decision to be made about this very critical piece of legislation.
Now, Senator Xenophon has even raised the prospect of Parliament being forced to return again in December if the vote doesn't go ahead this week. Monica Attard, is Nick Xenophon going to be particularly popular with his colleagues who are already getting that whiff of avgas in Canberra for the end of the parliamentary year? If they're going to come back again?
I don't think he will be very popular, but if he's not a sucker. But I'll tell you what, he's probably a very good stuntsman because it's a good trick to pull, isn't it? On the eve of Parliament getting up for the year, to force the government's hand to release the plan. I mean, the opposition really had a red-hot go today. It was quite a fiery question time in the lower house, and in the upper house in the Senate it was an extraordinary display up there when Stephen Conroy, the Minister for Communications, attempted to leave the house, and Mary Jo Fisher of the Coalition decided that she'd really stir him along, and it was quite funny, but they had a red hot go. So I imagine there are quite a few nervous government Nellies down in the lower house. The
fact that they did have the 7-year secrecy clause that became a 2-week secrecy clause very quickly.
Right.
Is this a bad look? Does it look as though they not only have something to hide here, but also a little bit weak?
Well, it makes clearly both, but certainly I think it does make them look very, very weak, and that's something that all the commentators have been imploring Julia Gillard to take note of in the last couple of days, and she clearly hasn't been, although she has to stick her ground at this point in time. She can't look to be caving in at this point in time, can she, Paul? No.
But, I mean, I can't remember a single last week's session of Parliament where one of the independents or the minor parties haven't threatened to bring back the Parliament for a emergency December sitting. I remember it happening last year. I think it was something that Fielding was banging on about, and I mean, Nick Xenophon is now definitely the king of the one-liners in federal Parliament, and
he has a critical vote.
Oh, and he's very good at it's a critical vote which becomes far less critical after July.
Next year. But they can't wait that long.
But they can't wait that long.
But is it fair enough, though, Paul, that Nick Xenophon says, well, look, you want me to vote on this week, should I not have a look at it and also talk about my reasons for voting whichever way I choose to vote?
I can't see why they can't release a business plan, to be honest. I think it's a solid business plan. I believe in the NBN. I think I was very sceptical about the NBN when it was first announced.
So have you seen it, that you know that it's so solid?
Oh, don't be silly.
Well, you just said it was a solid business plan.
Don't be silly. Don't be silly.
I mean,
but I think it is important in a democracy, and when you're having a investment in such a huge infrastructure project, that a solid case is made. And I think there is a solid case to be made there for the NBN. So I think the government's been a bit caught up.
So why do you think they're not releasing it then?
Well, I think it's one of those things that happens in politics, where you get caught up, you say one thing and then you have to back it in the whole time. I can't understand it. I don't know.
Kerry, is this a winner for the opposition? Because all the polls say the majority of Australians support this, think it's money well spent, $43 billion well spent, and yet the opposition seems to be gaining a bit of ground by pushing this, saying, well, show us the bottom line. What's the problem?
The problem the government has is that it has not got a good track record on the delivery of program. I mean, if you look at, for example, pink bats, dare I say it, pink bats. You look at building education revolution, dare I say it, and there is a scepticism, I think, in the public mind, let alone the politicians and the opposition, but in the public mind, about the ability of the government to deliver. Now, all this is doing, by not releasing the business plan, is feeding into that scepticism. All it is people out there who may be 100% supportive of the concept are saying, well, hold on, is it really only going to be $43 billion? If it is $43 billion, we need to see how you're going to be spending that money and, where it's going to go. And I don't actually get it. I don't get why the government...
At what point does it become tasteless to keep talking about the Pink Bats program, though, given that this is not being done as an emergency stimulus measure? This is something that's being rolled out over a period of time.
It's all about the ability to deliver a program. Now, those programs were a lot less money. They weren't at $40+ billion. And what the government's problem is, I think, is that they're risking their own credibility by not putting it into the public arena because it does look shifty. Why aren't you prepared to put into the public arena, to have the people who you want to vote on this have a look at how you are going to spend $43 billion? I mean, because I've got friends in the IT industry who are salivating at the whole thought of the NBN, as you'd expect them to, but they're not even convinced that it's going to be $43 billion. They think, well, let's see what happens when we see what the plan says to see what it really will cost.
Let's talk about Julia Gillard. It seems right now she's still far from convincing a lot of people that she's worked out how to be Prime Minister. Another focus group has been commissioned, and interestingly, this focus group has said that Julia Gillard could well end up going much the same way as Kevin Rudd if she doesn't manage to lift her game. Yet another focus group, Paul Howes, telling the Labor Party what it doesn't want to hear. Are we going to get a focus group saying we've heard enough from focus groups at some point?
From a Liberal-aligned pollster that uses some very unusual methodology in how it collates its results.
But there are people within the Labor movement saying Julia really hasn't found a feet yet.
That same outfit, JWS, is apparently the brains behind Hawker Britton. What's your Crosby Texter? Look, I think she's doing the right thing at the moment, which is not listening to the polls constantly and actually trying to develop a narrative and a sense of purpose for a government that finds itself in an incredibly unusual position. A government that no government in this country has been in that position since World War II. And I think she will rightly take time to develop clear and succinct and realistic policies to make the country better. And that's
Are you feeling a bit of a stage mother right now, seeing her there not quite getting the right tone, seeming very happy when she's attacking Tony Abbott in Parliament, being the attack dog, but maybe not fitting the Prime Ministerial...
Stage mother, that's a ridiculous comment,
You've got a lot invested, though, in her Prime Ministership. You want her to succeed.
Of course I want her to succeed. I'm sure that Kerry wants Liberals to succeed. Labor people want Labor people to succeed. One of the problems that the Labor government had for the last 3 years was that they didn't take the tough decisions. They didn't see the fights out, and they were poll-driven. They were completely poll-driven. It was big idea, big fight gets too hard, dump that big idea, next big idea. She's not doing that, and that's the right thing to do. John Howard had that style of governments. He wasn't concerned about polls the entire way through. He wouldn't get gun-shy when this happens, and it's been a hard year for Labor. 2010 will go down in Labor history with years like 1996, 1975, 1957 as being one of the worst years for the party, and that's not unusual for us not to be firing on all cylinders at the moment.
Kerry Chikarovski, you know what it's like to be a woman becoming a leader of a major political party and to have a lot under the pump and to face a tough election and to know that you've got a lot of people investing a lot of hopes in your success, but also potentially some women being your harshest critics, saying we've been waiting for you, and now, do you feel for Julia Gillard?
Oh, look, I actually ran into Julia at an airport before she became Prime Minister, but while she was Deputy Prime Minister, and I did say to her at the time... No, I did say to her at the time, look, I know we're on opposite sides of the fence, but if you ever feel like you need someone to talk to, because I do know how it's hard and it's isolating in many ways, because there aren't a lot of other women, in fact, in her case, no other woman who's been in that position, so it can be very isolating, and you sometimes just need to talk to someone. She hasn't, I must say, taken up the offer yet, but it's still there if she needs to. But look, I think the thing which concerns me most about what Paul just said is that he said, they've got to develop policy. Well, hold on, they're actually the government, and I would have thought they had a policy agenda which they were going to implement over the next 3 years. So I'm hoping that they do actually have policies that they want to put into place beyond the NBN. But the other thing I think that she can afford to do, and I think people are kind of, Paul's right about John Howard, people keep on saying to me, this is a government that's not going to last. Well, I have absolutely no expectation that this government will not go its full term. I think that it's in the interests of a whole lot of people, including the independents, to make sure does go. So she's got 3 years. She doesn't really have to be too concerned about, whether an election was held tomorrow, because it's not going to be held tomorrow. So she can take some tough decisions and she can actually put an agenda in place.
Monica Attard, do you think Julia Gillard has 3 years, or has Bill Shorten got
no.
2.5?
Oh, no, I certainly... That's a very funny question. No, I certainly think Julia Gillard has got 3 years. I mean, who knows what will happen towards the next election. But, I mean, I'm absolutely in agreement with Kerry on that one. I think a lot of people have a great vested interest in her being there till the death. But she has to develop a narrative, a more cogent narrative, long before the next election. And presumably... in this parliamentary break that's coming up, she's going to be regrouping both within her own mind and with those around her, and she'll be coming up with some kind of strategy to convince the nation that she does have a bigger vision beyond, a prosperous economy and, and a happy and relaxed bunch of Australians. And I would assume also that, she'll have to develop a narrative that tells us not only where we're going, but put us all at ease about what happened this year, because I think there is still a fair amount of disquiet out there about what happened.
And whether you believe it was a Liberal-backed focus group or not, I think there is a feeling within the community of a level of concern about the demise of Kevin, and we could go on for hours about that.
I think it changed people's view of Julia Gillard. I think for a long time there, people saw her as a potential Prime Minister. Then what happened, and people felt that was an ugly scenario, and it changed people's minds about her.
Just quickly, final word to you, Paul.
Well, I don't disagree with what Kerry or Monica have said. I mean, it's you don't pull these big ideas out of a box underneath the table. I mean, it takes time to develop these big ideas. The government has an agenda, but translating that agenda into policy and into action in a minority government situation with a hostile Senate is a very different kettle of fish to having an outright majority in both houses of Parliament, as the coalition did in their last term, and being able to go forward. Now, there's been plenty of minority governments where people have said they'll fall over in their first term. I think about Mike Rann, Peter Beattie, Bob Carr. I reckon for all of those three leaders, their best term was their first term when they were in minority government. A lot of people thought they were going to fall over in those first terms, but they didn't, and they went on to become incredibly electorally successful.
Would Bill Shorten make a good Prime Minister?
Bill Shorten makes a great Assistant Treasurer.
Now, Labor is potentially bracing itself for a big stoush with the unions over the issue of equal pay for equal work. They're angry that the federal government appears to have backed away from supporting what would have been an historic test case before Fair Work Australia.